Good morning, everyone. All right, this is assignment 5 for the Conscious Relationship class. Today in this assignment, we're going to be looking at some practical relationship skills, and we're going to be talking about that in terms of spiritual practice also. So the first skill I want to talk to, of two, there are going to be two. The first one is what people call boundaries and consequences. So let me give you a little bit of sense of what that is and give you some examples, and then I'll give you the actual assignment that's associated with this. So as we explored in the last class, the normal way that people, I don't want to say normal actually, the conditioned way that people will attempt to communicate if they want some change in behavior to happen on the part of the, someone in the relationship with, is aggressively or passive aggressively. So I'm not going to explain that again because we went through that thoroughly in the last class, but I think you know what I mean. We tend to try to motivate people by humiliating them, shaming them, belittling them, being sarcastic, suppressing them or crushing them, that kind of thing. And of course that doesn't work, and I'm sure you have experienced that very thoroughly for yourself because it just causes resistance and conflict with the other person. And even if you do manage to change their behavior, it's going to be temporary because they haven't decided to change it willfully on their own. They've just been forced to because of the humiliation or shame or whatever. So of course we don't want to do that. And luckily there is an alternative. And this has been, for me in my own relationships, I actually didn't know this. I didn't understand this while I was at the monastery because there was really no way to practice this. So we just, because we didn't talk to each other and have personal relationships with each other. And so it really never came up in conversation. But after I left, I learned about, various relationship skills. And this is one of them, has been absolutely transformative in my own relationship, to realize that there is a centered, conscious, kind way to ask other people for a change in behavior. And the centered part, of course, is kind of key to this because we're doing spiritual practice. And so that's why this is a part of a spiritual orientation to a relationship, because in order to do what I'm about to describe, you have to be centered. You have to be willing to let go of your own conditioning that would want to shame or humiliate or crush another person. Okay? All right, so the boundaries and consequences thing is actually very simple. What you're doing basically is you are drawing a line somewhere around some behavior, and you're giving the other person a choice. And that's key. You're giving the other person a choice. You're not trying to get them to do something. You're not forcing them to do something or pushing them to do something. You're giving them a choice. And there are, depending on which choice they make, there are consequences on both sides. Okay? So for example, here's one that I actually mentioned in the class already one time. So there's somebody I was working with. It's a woman whose husband tended to get enraged when he would drive, and would drive super aggressively in a way that really scared her. And so she didn't want to ride with him when he was driving. But she did anyway for years because she didn't see any alternative. She had tried the passive aggressive and the aggressive. She probably actually didn't try the aggressive, but she did the passive aggressive way of trying to get him to stop. And of course that doesn't do any good, as we've discussed. So what she learned to do as we were talking is to draw a boundary with consequences. So here's what that looked like. He would want her to go somewhere with him, and so she would say, I would be happy to go with you. I would like to go with you if you will agree to drive in a safe way that feels comfortable for me. If you do not agree to drive in a safe way that feels comfortable for me, then I'm not going to go with you. So super simple, right? There's the boundary. He has to, if she's going to ride with him, he has to drive safely, and he has a choice. If he wants to drive the way he normally does, where he drives really aggressively, then that's fine. She just won't go. And if he decides that he's willing to agree that he will drive safely, then he gets to have her go with him, which is what he wants. And that's, this as an aside, in terms of boundaries and consequences, the leverage you have is somebody else wants something. If somebody else doesn't want something, you have no power over their behavior. But if they want something, you do. So in this case, he wants her to go with him. And so that gives her the power to draw a boundary, basically to set up the situation in a way that works for her. Okay? All right, so that's one example. A slightly more, and that's pretty low level, a slightly more higher level one is, let's say you're communicating with someone and they're yelling at you to try to get their point made, or in some other way being aggressive. A way to, what people will typically do is be aggressive back or passive aggressive back. And of course that doesn't work. So if you're going to apply boundaries and consequences in that situation, then you could say something like, I feel like you're yelling at me right now. I feel like you're being aggressive towards me, and that is not okay with me. If you are willing to stop yelling at me and stop being aggressive towards me, then we can continue this conversation. And if you're not willing, then we're going to stop. I'm going to leave and I'm going to discontinue this conversation. Okay, so same thing, very simple. There's a boundary, and the boundary this time is around the way the other person is communicating, and then a choice. It's a choice. And the thing that's so good about this, and then I have appreciated so much about learning this, is that they are making a free choice. And so you don't have to apply any of that conditioned stuff we were talking about. It's clean. You're not bringing any of your own conditioning into it. Unless, the thing you're asking for is a conditioned thing. And so there's something to look into there too. Is this a reasonable request? Is this a centered request? So of course we have to do that part of our spiritual work. But assuming that the thing you're asking for is reasonable and is good for you and for the other person, and in both those instances, notice that the thing that's being asked for is good for both people, not just the person who is making the request, then you can let go of, all the conditioned stuff that might go around it, and it's super clean. Okay, all right. And then I'll give you one more example, and this one's kind of extreme. This is big leagues kind of stuff. I was working with someone, as another woman, and in this case, she had a partner, and they had a good relationship, or really cared about each other and everything. She had some young children, and he didn't want to be involved with her children. He was very reluctant to, and for good reason, actually, because he had had a bad experience with someone else, and he didn't want to move into like a fatherly role with these kids because he's concerned about the impact of that on his life and all these different things. So some pretty good reasons and some potentially valid reasons to not be in relationship, because of course it was really important to her. That he be in relationship with her children. She didn't necessarily need for him to be in a father role, and she would say that to him, but that was very hard for him to take in because he was projecting that was an expectation actually. So they went on around this for a long time, and she would ask for it, she would beg for it, she would try to do the passive aggressive stuff around it, try to get him, and of course that doesn't work, and it just never works, at least long term. And so what she figured out to do as we were talking is, and she actually came up with the idea. I mean, I was teaching her about boundaries and consequences, but she came up with the idea, and it was kind of breathtaking. So what she said was, she went to him one day, after she had exhausted all the other means she had. She said, look, it's really important to me, if we're going to be in relationship, that you be involved with my kids. That is a condition for this relationship. And so what I would like to ask is that we take a month apart and that we don't communicate for a month. And during that month, I want you to look to see if you're willing to be in relationship with me, if that involves being with my children. And after the month, if you decide that is what you want to do, awesome. That would be wonderful. And we can continue the relationship with the expectation that you will show up and you will be in relationship with my kids. And if you don't, that's cool too. That just means this relationship can't work. And then I'll ask you to tell me that, and then we'll go our separate ways. Hang on just a second. So, very powerful. And then what happened, just to tell you the story, is, he was kind of shocked, because, people just don't do this. They don't know how to do this. They don't communicate assertively in these ways and draw these kind of boundaries. But it's really powerful. And he was just kind of stunned. I mean, I was actually working with him too, so I was kind of working both sides, which was fun. I got to support him as he dealt with this. And it took him probably a couple of weeks to kind of, get back on his feet and recover. And then he started really looking, and he realized over the course of the rest of the month that he really did want to be with her. And he was willing to let go of the fear he had around being in a relationship with her children, and he did. And then he told her that at the end, and they joined back together. And as of this time, he is intimately involved with her children. It's really powerful and effective. Okay, all right. So hopefully you'll have a sense of that. And if there's any questions or anything about this, feel free to post the questions in the class. So your assignment is, I'm going to ask you, I'll give you a written assignment right now, and then I'll ask you to pause the video and do some writing about it. So your assignment is to look at your own relationships of all kinds. This doesn't just apply to intimate relationships. This can apply to all kinds of relationships. Of course, it most directly applies to relationships between parents and children. That's kind of where it comes from. But anyway, all kinds of relationships. So look at your relationships and see, where are you holding appropriate boundaries in a skillful way? And where are you not? Where are you using these other, conditioned forms of communication? And so kind of get a lay of the land. Where are you with this? Do you have this skill? Do you know how to practice this skill or not? And where do you need to practice it? Look to see what goes on with you when you consider communicating in the way that I'm talking about here and demonstrating. What goes on with you? Does conditioned mind freak out? Are you afraid, or do you feel inadequate? Anything like that? And then choose an area where you'd like to practice. And it would be great if you actually practiced this in some way. And it could be a little tiny way, just a little boundary to hold with somebody, with your partner, or with a friend, or with a coworker, or a boss, or something like that. Or it could be bigger, if you want to take on a bigger one. But go ahead and practice this and see what happens. And again, we're doing spiritual practice here. This is intended towards improving relationships, and it will. I guarantee it. If you take on this skill and learn how to communicate assertively like this and draw boundaries, it will dramatically improve all of your relationships. That's what's happened with me. So it's a skill, and it needs to be practiced. So so practice it, and then when you have practiced it a little bit, then write into the class and tell us what your experience is. Okay, so I'm going to pause now so you can write about that and explore that and see where you want to practice this. Okay, welcome back. So I'm going to go to skill number 2, and this is about feedback and offering feedback. From my perspective, it is pretty much darn impossible to have a good relationship if there's no conscious and agreed upon way to offer feedback back and forth between the two people. I mean, if it's a low-level relationship like a casual friendship, not so much. But I'm talking about like a partnership, parent-children, even like boss-employee, or even especially there, I would say. So there has to be a way to offer feedback that is conscious and centered. And again, we have all these conditioned ways of doing that, where we try to offer feedback to somebody in a way that's aggressive or passive-aggressive, and it just doesn't work for all the reasons I've already mentioned. And there is a better way of doing it. And so the key here, again, the spiritual part of this is we have to get present, we have to get centered. We have to let go of our own conditioning. And that can be hard to do. If somebody else is doing something that's really troubling or irritating or difficult for me, it's difficult to get past the cultural condition we have that says the way to deal with that is to let them have it in some way, whether that's aggressive or passive. So it can be difficult to do. But there's a better way. And so we need to get centered. And then it's really good to ask the other person if they are willing for feedback, if they are open to receiving some feedback. There's a post from Dana in the class that I encourage you to read, where she describes how she and Mike have managed to do this, and it's beautiful. They have agreed that this is the way they're going to do it. They're going to, if they want one person wants to offer feedback to another, they'll ask, say, I actually have some feedback for you, or is this a good time? And the other person could say, no, this is actually not a good time. I'm busy, I'm distracted, I'm freaked out, or whatever. No, but I will, I'm willing to. And then they'll set it, if that's the case, if both people are willing, know, if the person receiving the feedback is willing, you go ahead and do it right then. And if not, they would set aside another time where they would get together and where they're both in a good place and they could have a productive adult conversation about whatever the issue is. Okay, so that's step one, is to ask if the other person is open to feedback. It's nice, of course, to have an agreement that that's what we do in this relationship, where we offer each other feedback. Sometimes in some kind of relationships that's not possible, and you just have to offer feedback without that. But that's ideal, especially in an intimate relationship or a partnership. It's really nice to have that kind of agreement so that you have a place to stand on when you want to be practicing these kinds of skills. Okay, so let's say you have agreement from the person, they're open to feedback. What do you do? The key thing that I've learned in this is you have to just stick with the facts. Okay, no projections. So you're not adding anything to it. And of course, you're leaving out all the shame and guilt and humiliation and all that kind of stuff that we do. But it's just sticking with the facts. And there's a formula. There's various kind of ways. There's kind of various, I guess you call them formulas, that you can follow, or procedures you can follow. Some more simple, more complex. I'm not going to tell you about the complex ones, but if any of you are interested and want to learn some of that, let me know and I'll teach it to you. But I'll give you a simple one that I find to be really effective. It's called an OPS, OPS. Okay, the O stands for observation, the P stands for perception, and the S stands for suggestion, or we could also say request there. So the observation is just the fact. What have you seen? What have you noticed? The perception is what is there about that causes you to communicate. Or another word you could use is like implication or consequence. What's the consequence of the thing that you are seeing? And the suggestion is basically or request. In a lot of cases, it's going to be more of a request than a suggestion. If you are, hold on a second, the heater just kicked on. If you are, giving somebody else feedback in a way about something that has no impact on you, then it's more of a suggestion. If you're giving, if it's something that affects you, then you're going to want to make a request. Okay, so observation, perception, request, or suggestion, OPS. Okay, so let's give an example. This is the example I always use. This is from my previous relationship, actually, not my current one. I was living in an apartment with my partner, and we had various agreements about how we would do things, which is a really good thing to have. Kind of down to the nitty gritty, like where do things go, stuff like that. And one of the agreements we had was anytime anybody makes themselves some food in the kitchen, they clean up afterwards before they go on to do something else, so the kitchen remains clean and tidy. Okay, that's a pretty good agreement. I would sometimes fail to follow that agreement that we would have, and my partner had the option to be aggressive or passive aggressive towards that and try to get me to change my behavior, which kind of sometimes happened in the beginning before we kind of figured all this stuff out together. I learned this relationship stuff that I am, kind of advocating here in that relationship. But after a while, we learned how to communicate from center and effectively about it in a way that really worked. And so what she would do is, OPS, okay? So and she wouldn't say my observation is, my perception is, but she would kind of follow that formula. She would say, I noticed the other day when you made some food for yourself and you didn't clean up afterwards. So that's the observation. I want to remind you that we have an agreement that whenever we are going to cook food, that we clean up after ourselves. There's the perception or the implication. My request of you is that you follow the agreement that we have and that you clean up whenever you have cooked something in the kitchen. Right? Super simple. And notice how clean it is. She's not projecting onto me. She's not saying, it's not like, she's saying you're a bad person, you're a jerk, what's wrong with you? Why do you keep doing this? That gives her a way to keep all of her conditioning totally out of it. And at the same time be willing to make the communication. Okay? Now, that's a very low level one. There's going to be high level ones too. What would be, let me see if I can think of a good example. Well, this isn't a whole lot higher level, but this is another example that just comes to mind. This is something that came up with somebody not too long ago. Their partner, I think maybe I have mentioned this in another video, can't remember, but their partner, they like to go out on the town, and their partner, for what, it was kind of a homebody and didn't really want to do that. And so they said to their partner, I'm noticing that we're not going out together. We're not spending time out, out of the house, just having fun together, And so that's the observation. The perception is, and that I feel like that hurts our relationship. I think our relationship would be better. We'd feel more connected if we could spend time having fun together, doing fun things. And then the request was, and so I want to ask if you would be willing to, to go out with me more, and why don't we do it this Friday, or whatever. So again, super clean, very gentle, and it's easy when somebody is receiving that kind of feedback. It's very difficult to receive feedback. Ego just reacts to that a lot of times. That's what has always happened in me anyway. And this is a kind of the gentlest way I know that you can offer feedback, and it gives people a chance to, receive it without getting triggered themselves. And so you can imagine you could do the same thing with really high level things. I'm thinking of a number of examples. Let's say someone has done something that's really damaging to the relationship. Someone has had, this is an extreme example, somebody's had an affair, somebody has, just, I don't know what else, but done something that is really not okay. You could apply the same thing there. This thing happened. I noticed this thing happened. That's the observation, the perception. This is not okay with me. This cannot happen if our relationship is going to continue. And so my request is that you immediately stop this behavior and never do it again, or else we can no longer be in a relationship with each other like that. Okay, so hopefully that's clear. So your assignment with this is similar. I'll give you a chance to write in just a second. So look to see where do you practice good feedback, good skillful feedback like this? Do you practice good skillful feedback like this? And where is it needed? Where might you practice this in your life, in your relationships? Where would you like to work on this? And then just as in the previous one, try it, give it a try. Offer somebody some feedback. If you're in a partnership situation with someone, then you can, it'd be nice to have a conversation with them about it, explain, and ask if they're willing for that to be a part of your relationship. That's the ideal. If that doesn't feel like you can pull that off, if the other person is not going to be willing, then you're going to, have to do it without that. But you might pick something small, just some little thing, like the not cleaning up after myself example. You can take it on in a bigger way if there's something that you want to explore and really affect in a bigger way too. But just try it. And so, we're learning the skills. And again, as with the other ones, watch what arises for you. Even as I explain this, as you consider doing it, as you actually do it, watch what happens, because it's very likely the conditioned system is going to react strongly to this. And not necessarily, I guess, but it would be typical, because this is way out of the range of the way we're supposed to be in our conditioned society. We're supposed to be nice. We're not supposed to make any waves. We're supposed to support each other in our conditioning. I'll support your conditioning if you support mine, and we are not doing that with using these techniques. These techniques, they allow the person who's using the techniques to get to center, and they potentially allow the other person too. You're basically, when you're offering feedback in this way, or using these boundaries and consequences in this way, you're basically inviting the other person to center with you, where you can have an adult conversation about whatever is going on. Okay? So have fun with that, if that seems possible. It's been really fun and interesting with me to explore these things, so have fun with that and give it a try. Okay, so go ahead and pause the video. Let me give you some chance to write about that and explore, and then I'll say one little thing after you're done. Okay, very good. All right, lastly, basically I just want to say thank you. Thank you for your participation in the class. We're in week 5, so you've hung in here this far. That's awesome. And I want to acknowledge, this has just been on my mind that it's just difficult. I recognize this takes effort, and it also takes a lot of willingness because, with all of these assignments, it asks us to look deeply at our own processes, and that can be hard to do. So thank you for your willingness to do this work. Keep showing up, okay? Keep doing the assignments, keep posting in the class right to the very end so that you can take full advantage of this opportunity, okay? So take care, be well. Thank you for your practice and for your willingness to show up in this way, and I will see you soon in the class.